Week 17 of the fantasy football season with the final championship here for fantasy owners. Here's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire this week. The first tight end, Taysom Hill of the New Orleans Saints. So Hill, we know he does a little bit of everything. He's a gadget guy for this New Orleans Saints team. And we really haven't seen much out of him, obviously, as Taysom Hill this season, where he was out a decent amount with coming off a torn ACL from last season. But Hill finally got big run in Week 16 versus Jets. 38 pass yards, a touchdown. 42 rush yards on 12 carries and 4 catches, 36 yards in that one and a fumble loss. So they used him in a lot of ways, obviously, was this New Orleans Saints team. And down now to their third string back, they didn't trust Audric Estime 100%, and that's where Taysom Hill came in, and they used him in a lot of formations, is this New Orleans Saints team. So this week, a good matchup coming up at the Tennessee Titans. Give up the 13th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. But we know Taysom Hill, he's not really a tight end. He's just a former quarterback that lines up all over the field. So now coming off a big game. And like I said, they're down to their third string running back. Going to use Hill way more, I believe, is this New Orleans Saints team, especially this week. And he's a good ad this week, available in 99% of fantasy leagues. The next tight end, Colston Loveland of the Chicago Bears. So Colston Loveland, he's out there still in 57% of fantasy leagues. And he's starting to get things going over the last 4 or 5 weeks as well. And I know some good games and some down games has been for him. But this offense now, Rome Odunze, he's hurt. He's been hurt over the last couple weeks. He hasn't played. Luther Burden, he was down last week. He didn't play. We don't know if he's going to return in Week 17 at the Niners. But Loveland is going out there, and he's made some plays. Week 13 at Philly, 3 catches, 28 yards. Week 14 at the Packers, 4 catches, 29 yards, a touchdown. Week 15 versus the Browns, 4 catches, 63 yards. And Week 16 versus the Packers, 3 catches, 30 yards in that game. So this week, like I said, pretty decent matchup at the Niners. Give up the 11th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And Loveland, he's getting opportunity, and he's been decent. So he's available in 57% of leagues. Next tight end, A.J. Bonner of the Seattle Seahawks. A.J. Bonner, to me, he's been a consistent number 2 option in this passing game behind Jackson Smith-Njigba all season long for the Seattle team. Cooper Kupp hasn't done much. Shaheed, he hasn't done much till recently, and that's been more in the return game than anything. And A.J. Bonner, at least he's getting targeted, and he's made some plays on and off this season. Week 14 at the Falcons, 3 catches, 27 yards. Week 15 versus the Colts, 3 catches, 27 yards. And Week 16 versus the Rams, 4 catches, 49 yards, a touchdown in that one. So this week, good matchup with the Carolina Panthers. Give up the 15th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And like I said, A.J. Bonner, he's been a big red zone threat this season for the Seattle Seahawks team. He has 5 touchdowns on the year, A.J. Bonner, where him and JSN have been the most consistent touchdown guys in the receiving room as well for the Seattle Seahawks team. So right now, well, he's out there in 88% of fantasy leagues, and that's a pretty decent matchup coming up. He's an ad this week. Next tight end, Mike Gesicki of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Mike Gesicki's a touchdown-dependent tight end. And when this offense is rolling, you see the damage they do, and they won 45-21, even though I know it was at a weak Miami Dolphin defense. So the last few weeks for Gesicki, 2 out of 3 games, double-digit fantasy games. Week 14 at Buffalo, 6 catches, 86 yards, a touchdown. Week 15 versus the Ravens, a catch, 11 yards. And Week 16 at the Dolphins, 3 catches, 35 yards, and a touchdown. So this week, a good matchup once again versus the Arizona Cardinals. Their defense gives up the 8th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. We saw Kyle Pitts find the end zone in last week's game. And I think Gesicki is a big target and possibly a touchdown-dependent option to help fantasy owners in deeper leagues. And he's out there in 96% of fantasy leagues. And the final tight end, Darnell Washington, Pittsburgh Steelers. Darnell Washington over the last few weeks, he's getting more involved in the offense a little bit for this Pittsburgh Steelers team, even though he really hasn't produced fantasy numbers, but he's a big target, and the guy they especially using a lot in the red zone is this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Week 14 at Baltimore, catch, 12 yards. Week 15 versus Miami, 3 catches, 25 yards. And Week 16 at the Lions, he tried breaking a couple tackles in the red zone and then fumbled it, 3 catches, 36 yards, and a fumble. So, like I said, Darnell Washington, he's a big target. He's a big body, 6'8", over 300 pounds. And this week, it's a decent matchup at the Cleveland Browns. And like I said, he is a super sleeper streaming option is Washington. But like I said, it seems like they're getting a little bit more involved in this offense the last few weeks is Pittsburgh, even though the numbers haven't translated. So he's more of a deeper league edge. That's a few tight ends I looked at off the wire for Week 17 of the fantasy football season.